So last week here on the channel, I was getting into the ins and outs of my brand new mobile phone, the Samsung Galaxy S24 Plus. And while I was checking out the good and the bad and wrapping my head around it, I was also reminiscing a little bit about previous phones that I've owned along the timeline. Stuff like the Sony Ericsson K850i, the iPhone 4, one of the very, very early models. There was also the Motorola Razr V3. And then I also mentioned one that I barely recall, the HTC Wildfire. After I put up that video, I started thinking a little bit more about that particular phone. Namely, how did I come to own an HTC Wildfire? Because I don't remember signing up to one, seeing an ad for one, knowing anything about an HTC Wildfire, and yet I owned one for a time. Well, the good news is I have done some investigation. I've dug up a very old blog post, and it turns out that back in the day, I was actually given a free HTC Wildfire phone. And after 2 weeks of using it, I discovered why I was given that phone for free, because it was an absolute piece of shit. G'day YouTube, Al here from One Man Many Plans, and of course the blog of the same name, onemanmanyplans.com.au, and I'm happy to report that things are going very, very well with my Samsung Galaxy S24 Plus. It's now the camera phone that I'm using to record this YouTube stuff. It has been great so far. Always the way of talking about something on YouTube though, as soon as you hit upload, something that you mentioned ends up not being the case. I did talk about the great battery life, and then I had a couple of days of really, really rough battery life with this thing, and it turns out that that seems to be related to the One UI that comes prepackaged with this phone. Sometimes I have great battery life, sometimes I don't, sometimes I have to refresh it. I'm kind of waiting for the next update. Samsung, please push that out and get onto that, because I know I'm not the only one having problems with it, but for the most part, absolutely brilliant phone. But like I said at the start of this piece, reminiscing about the earlier models, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between, has led me down the path, and it was a very vague one for me because there weren't too many details to go on, how I ended up with an HTC Wildfire. Because you say those words and no one, unless they've owned one, has any idea what you're talking about. But back in the day, back in 2011, I ended up as an owner of an HTC Wildfire. And after I posted up that video, I thought long and hard, and I thought, again, I didn't see any ads for this. It wasn't in any catalogue I remember. I don't remember ever walking into a Telstra store here in Australia and going, you know what I want? I want an HTC Wildfire, because I've heard so much about it. I knew nothing about this phone. And it wasn't until I remembered that I actually wrote a review about this on one of my early blogs back in 2011. Yeah, we're talking 13 years ago at the time of this one, that I thought, oh, maybe that'll shed some light on how this actually came to be in my collection. And it turns out, the story goes, according to the article that I wrote, my radio show was doing a live broadcast from a Telstra shop. I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was the release of the new iPhone. iPhone 4, it would have been around 2011. For whatever reason, we were there, we were doing a show, and I was still rocking my F480. I mentioned this in the last video. I've since discovered, or rediscovered I should say, that it's actually a Samsung F480. Again, one of those phones. It was a very, 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 very budget smartphone back in the day, that if you couldn't afford an iPhone, you could try this one. I don't remember anything crash hot about it, but it worked. While we were doing the show, one of the guys that worked there noticed me texting or doing something on that phone and just went, "What the hell is that?" And I said, that is a Samsung F480T. The T stood for Telstra because it was a Telstra locked phone at the time. And he said, "Oh, mate, what a piece of that is. Here, we'll get you something better." And took an HTC Wildfire off the shelf and gave it to me. And I said, oh, thank you. Do I have to give this back? No, mate, just use it. Just bury that Samsung. This is so much better. And when you get a new phone and, you've been using the same phone for almost the length of the contract, my contract had about another 6 months to run out, according to the blog post. I thought, great, for the next 6 months, I can use this phone. And if I don't like it, fantastic, I can upgrade in 6 months' time. Well, it took me 2 weeks to discover the foibles of the HTC Wildfire, and I certainly didn't like it. Now, if you've never seen this phone before, thanks to the beauty of YouTube, let's bring you up to date with this incredibly smart phone from 2011. I thank you for whoever uploaded this back in the day. Amazing that I'm only seeing this out in 2024, but that's the power of YouTube, isn't it? Everything that you never saw back in the day, you have a chance to relive now. So I never saw that ad. I knew nothing about this phone when it was presented to me in a box. I still know nothing about this phone, let's be honest, and I certainly don't know anything about HTC. I'm going to have to do some research and find out if they are still an entity, still a company somewhere, or maybe they've joined forces or rebranded or something, I don't know. But what I do remember, what does stick in my mind, is the fact of how bad this phone really was. For the most annoying feature of all time, the fact that it burnt through its battery in no time flat. You take it off the charge, you do a couple of things, you'd be putting it back on the charge. It was awful. And so I present you from my article on my blog back in 2011, the HTC Wildfire, the good, the bad, and of course the ugly. There was plenty of bad and ugly in this phone. Budget entry-level smartphone with Android, it sure is. And it makes you quite happy to show off what apps you have, what you can do, and prove that you don't have to spend a mozza to get a phone with plenty of bits to play around with. Very easy to surf around, and if you get stuck, just hit the home button and you're back to the starting screen. The touchpads are the right sensitivity, you don't have to squint to read the screen, and it's quite comfy to hold. Callers sound good, alarms work well, and while the QWERTY-style SMS does take a while to get used to, for a guy like me, it is easy to adapt to. Range is also pretty good. I haven't found a place where I can't call out of yet. When trying to customize this phone with your own alarms, tones, whatever, it's like owning a foreign car and hoping that someone knows what you're talking about when you take it to a mechanic. It can be done, but not without some work and a trip to Google to find out how. Luckily, plenty of people have worked it out, but it'd be nice if there were drag and drop options instead of writing new pathways on the memory card and lots of fiddling around on a computer. Depending on the size of your fingers, you will hit the wrong letter a lot. This gets annoying quickly. The HTC Wildfire has the battery longevity of a cold, crisp beer at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. Just me writing that sentence has resulted in it chewing through more of its power supply, and it's currently in my pocket remaining quiet. Calling, gaming, surfing, application, anything at all really, and it runs out of puff more than an asthmatic marathoner. This, of course, does not bode well when your fiancée has just downloaded Angry Birds on it and wonders why she can't play it all afternoon. On top of that is its non-call service, or rather the struggles it has with them. Trying to send a picture to my own email address resulted in having to work out 3 different workarounds to finally get the picture on Facebook, and none of them involved a simple process. My Twitter feed updated once in 3 days. To actually get it to refresh, I had to delete my profile address out of the phone and start all over again. Some apps refresh, some don't. When apps work, they're great. When they don't, it is a big hassle. And a lot of users are complaining about the software that comes with it that syncs your Wildfire to Outlook. The problem is that, namely, it doesn't work, or works partly, or fully for the first time and then grinds to a halt straight after. Now, I know we're talking very, very early smartphone technology, and obviously the phones of today are so much more smarter than they've ever been before. Yeah, the amount of work necessary to get this thing to do even the basics, which we take for granted now, it was an exercise in futility. It really, really was. And so I couldn't wait to finally bury, I know the sales rep wanted me to bury the F480. I couldn't wait to bury the HTC Wildfire. In fact, I think I threw it in the bin when it was done. It's not one of those phones that I've kept in a drawer for prosperity's sake or memory's sake. And only talking about it recently rejigged the memory to just go, oh yeah, that was a really, 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 really bad phone. But I'm proud to say that when I did bury that phone, the next thing that I bought was an iPhone 4. I mean, this one, still have it. Kids used to play with it as a toy when they were, toddlers. Haven't charged it up in about 1 million years. I have no idea what's on it. I don't care. Going from the HTC Wildfire to this was like having a Datsun to a twin-turbo Ferrari. Unbelievable. But that's a completely different story. HTC Wildfire, please, if you had one and you had frustrations with it, or maybe you worked it out and it was the greatest phone of your life, please share that story with us down below in a comment, because I love the fact that, just because I hated it doesn't mean that it was a bad phone. Actually, it was a really, really bad phone, but I want to find out from you how bad you found this phone. Did you walk into a store and go, I want that one? Or was it a case of, here is an HTC Wildfire. Try not to pull your hair out with all of its foibles and frustrations. Let me know in a comment below. And yeah, if you're loving these reminiscing sessions, because I certainly am, please let me know as well, because, you know, we've covered some game books, we're covering phones, old technology, still plenty in this shed to get through. Isn't it amazing when you talk about one thing and it just leads you down a path, sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes ugly, like the HTC Wildfire just did.